Okay, welcome everybody. I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and we're going to go ahead and get started. We apologize for that brief delay in getting started, but we are good to go. So my name is Jess Green. I'm with the EDFacts Partner Support Center, and thank you for joining us today. We're really excited for today's webinar. We are going to go over quite a few high-level topics. So again, thanks for joining us. Today, if you haven't joined the last couple of WebEx sessions we've hosted, we have a new feature. It's closed captioning, and you're able to add it by clicking the CC button on your screen. It's going to be in the lower left corner of your WebEx screen. So that's going to automatically generate captions for you. So we are going to go ahead and get started. So today, our topics are going to include a overview from the branch chief, Kelly Worthington. We have updates on file specs for you. I know you are looking forward to that. We're going to go over the 22-23 data collections and what they're going to look like over the next about year and a half, and kind of give you a bird's eye view of those. We're going to go over what you should be preparing for Go Live with EdPass. And then we're going to go over what to expect. And what types of things you should be doing now, and what is going to how to apply those activities once EdPass goes live. David Lee is going to provide us some standard features in EdPass, and we're going to go over how we know that you can do this. We've got some really exciting things coming up in the next couple of weeks, and we know that everyone is anticipating EdPass go live and a little anxious, but we know it's possible, and we're going to go over why. And at the end, we're going to have questions and answers with the department. So a couple of housekeeping things before I turn it over to Kelly. Today, if you have questions, please enter them in the Q&A panel of your WebEx screen. That's how you'll know as you answer your question, we're going to push it through, but then we will eventually stop between each section and we will go over the questions. So as you think of them, please put them in the chat, in the Q&A panel for us to answer. At the end of the webinar, there's going to be a poll, a post-survey webinar. It'll take about 3 to 5 minutes. So please take some time to do that so that we can focus on enhancing webinars in the future for you all. So today I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Worthington to kick us off. And I'll let you go.
Thank you so much, Jess. And I will echo Jess's apologies for our technical difficulties. It's just one of those things that happens once in a while, and I think you all understand that. So welcome. We understand there's a wide range of people that are represented here. So I'm just going to give you a couple of tips on how to listen to the webinar. For those of you who are really, directly impacted or doing something related to directory grades offered to the charter files that are going to be due in just a couple of months, this is most important for you to walk away with some of the details about the next steps. If you are an EdFacts coordinator setting up roles, it's extremely important that you understand the immediate next steps. For those who will be submitting data later in the year, this is a really important introduction to you about what will be coming up, questions you might have, and but the details are not as important because we're going to be doing repeats of this when we do other openings. So I just want to clarify that those who are related to directory grades offered and charter files, most important for you, some of the content here. But our goal here, just already went over what's going to be happening during the webinar, but we want you to walk away with a good working knowledge of what's going to be happening in the next couple of months, and how this is different from the processes that we have used for the last 15, 20 years with EdFacts. Part of that is that we are fixing some of the role creep that we have had, that Ed has kind of taken over some of the work that is really the responsibility of the state education agency, as well as districts and schools, to ensure that the state data are correct at the point that it's submitted to the Department of Ed. So SEAs are responsible for that data quality. That includes the timeliness of data, the accuracy of data, and the completeness of data at the due date. And I want to really emphasize that important point because our office is expected to use the data as soon as it is due. So part of what we are trying to correct here is that we have been receiving data that was not usable at the due date, and frankly, in many cases, was not usable for many months after the due date. So we're putting in place new tools and new processes to ensure that we are doing everything that we can to ensure success before the data are submitted to the department. So we'll just emphasize too on our end some of the changes in expectations. I don't know if it's really the changes, but it is an expectation that when we receive the data, we can use it. Our grant making offices are responsible for monitoring individual grantees. They are also responsible for ensuring that they are monitoring overall grant program effectiveness and impact. Are kids doing better as a result of these grant programs? We are responsible for presenting a national view of the data to our funders, Congress, to ensure that they can say what we are funding each year is having a positive impact on the outcomes that we're observing in schools. So we both need to do a better job in ensuring that we've got good, usable data in a timely manner, and that we're able to explain when there is, whether it's a performance issue, whether it's a data quality issue, data completeness issue. We have to be able to do a better job on that timeliness and the documentation of that information so that the people that we are accountable to can use the data well. So you are going to hear what's happening in the next several months. We're going to be going over some timelines. You'll leave with some actions to take to prepare for the opening and those first data submissions. You'll get a sneak peek at the new tool. You're going to get to see some of those screenshots. There's going to be some recognition for some of the states that we had a pilot of some of these concepts and process changes last year. And some of you did such a spectacular job. We just wanted to make sure that we recognized those states that really did an outstanding job and those that got really close. That was an important piece for us. I also wanted to recognize those states that have been participating in the user groups and informing us all along this development process, or providing input at conferences, providing input through the forum. We have really valued and appreciated your input as we build the new system and the new process, and we are grateful to you for your engagement in that. We just thank you. I know it's extra time for you. So let's see, at the end, as just said, we'll have plenty of time to answer questions. Reminder that soon after that directory grades offered and charter files, soon after that group is due, we will have IDEA child count data, free and reduced price lunch data, membership data, CCD school, and staff full-time equivalents. So if you are in part of that second group, this is also very relevant to you, but you don't have the immediate next steps. So thank you for joining us. Barb's going to go over some recent changes that we've made and some timeline impacts that I think are going to be a positive thing for you, just a little bit of a tweak and difference for us. So Barb, I think with that, I'm ready to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, next slide. So the first place I want to start is with an apology that the files 2023 have not been posted, all of them. We did post a few of them so you could see the core requirements and the record layouts. We're still working on some of the Q&A part of it, and those will be updated with all the full Q&As in the next 2 months. And what's listed there is the ones that are remaining. This includes some new file specs, and we're going to go ahead and post them to our regular place and ask that you review them. And if you have questions, particularly about the new ones, to send them to PSC. But that's true of any of them. If you have questions, be sure and send them through to PSC, and we'll get you back an answer. So next slide. So the bulk of the time I want to talk about how the collections are going to work. So in front of you is a little diagram going from February to August. We're in February now. We will be opening up the system on March 13th. It's a Monday. And when it opens up, you'll be able to submit your directory files, grades offered, and all the charter files. And those files will be due on April 26th. Earlier, we had posted that they would be due on April 12th, but we are behind on getting the system launched. So the same time that we're behind, we moved out the due date the same 2 weeks. The next set of files will be due on June 28th, and that will be the rest of the CCD, or the Common Core of Data early files, membership, staffing, the CCD school file, free and reduced price lunch, and the IDA child counts, both the school age and the early childhood. So those are going to be due June 28th, and we're going to open up the system on May 15th for you to submit those. So the key dates to be putting on your calendar are that the EdPass system goes live for directory grades offered in Charter on March 13th. Those are due then on April 26th. Then we reopen it up again on May 15th for the rest of the CCD, the Common Core of Data files, and for the IDA child count. And those are due on June 28th. Then we're going to stop and have a feedback session, finding out from the SEAs how did it go, so that we can adjust what we're doing for the later part of the year. And during that time, we're going to have some lessons learned webinars where you can provide feedback. And anytime along the line, if you just have something that you need to let us know, go ahead and send it into PSC. As was mentioned earlier, we do really appreciate your comments. Sometimes we're not able to deal with them right away, but we do take them seriously and try to fit them in as quickly as we can. So next slide. So after you finish your IDA child count and the rest of the CCD early files in June, the next set of files aren't due until January 10th of 2024. And that's when the assessment, the migrant education program, homeless, and chronic absenteeism will be due. So on the slide there, you can see we're going to open up the system for that next set of files on October 2nd. And then those first set of files are due in 2 steps. Some of the stuff will be due on January 10th, and some of it will be due on January 24th. And these files constitute what used to be due in the middle of December. Then the next set of files that we're going to open up will be on December 4th, and you'll be able to submit the accountability, the Title I Part A, the neglected and delinquent, ACGR, adjusted cohort graduation rate, and the rest of the CCD and the IDA files. And those files will be due on February 7th and February 28th. Now, in between this time, which is not on the screen, is in November, the IDA dispute resolution will still be due. So when you look at it again, you got stuff that's going to be due in April, then in June, then come November is the IDA dispute resolution, and then it's January and February, about every 2 weeks, some files will be due. Next slide. Okay. So one of the things that we used to do is we would collect metadata through the EMAP system, and you'd log in there to answer questions about the IDA, about grades offered and grads and completers and the Gun-Free Schools Act and your assessments. That is all being moved to EdPass. So on January 10th, along with the assessment files, you'll respond to the assessment metadata using EdPass. And then on January 24th, you're going to be submitting some Title III files and the English learner files, and along with them, you will submit some metadata on the English learner assessment. Then on February 7th, along with your Gun-Free Schools Act files, you'll be responding to the Gun-Free School Act questions. And this will all be within EdPass, whereas before you submitted the files in ESS, and then you went to EdPass to answer these metadata questions. And then on February 22nd, you're going to have the graduates and completers and the rest of the IDA questions about discipline, exiting, and personnel. At the same time, we're also going to be sending out questionnaires about accountability, but that probably won't be in EdPass. We're probably going to do that one manually. Next slide. So there will be, as I mentioned, two things that are going to be done outside of EdPass. One is the CCD grade software that's going to remain in EMAPS for this particular year. Next year, we'll move it into EdPass. The other one is the accountability questionnaire, which we're going to do manually this year, and we're going to move it into EdPass next year. Next slide. So then we have our friends, the IDA data collections. They're going to continue in EMAPS for this coming year and possibly even one more year. So in June, while you're submitting your Common Core data membership and staffing and other files and the IDA child count for Part B into EdPass, you will also need to go into EMAPS and submit your Part C child count. Then come November 15th, you'll submit the IDA Part B and Part C dispute resolutions through EMAPS. And then come along February, you're going to be submitting your IDA Part B files for exiting through EdPass, but the Part C stuff will still remain in EMAPS. And then finally, in February 22nd, that should say 2025, I believe. It's one more year out. You're going to do the IDA MOE CES. So again, there's a few things that are still going to be remaining in EMAPS. It's the Part C stuff and a couple of the little stragglers with the grades offered and with the accountability we'll probably do manually. Next slide. Okay, so the thing that you can mark on your calendar is that EdPass due dates will now be always on a Wednesday. They will be at midnight Eastern time. Before that due date, you actually have to hit a submit button. And this is, again, very different from ESS, where before the due date, all you had to do was get the files uploaded into ESS. Now you're going to have to upload the files, respond to any of the data quality thing, and then hit the submit button. The SSP will also be within EMAPS, or EdPass, I'm sorry, within EdPass. So when you come into EdPass, there'll be a screen where you can upload files. There'll be other screens where you can update your SSP. There'll be other screens where you can respond to your metadata. And then there'll be a place where you hit the submit button and the data is submitted. Now, the submit button won't show up until you've dealt with all the data quality issues. And data quality issues can be dealt with by adding a data note. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so what we have here is a picture of how we're doing it currently. So if you start on the left-hand side there, use the stage, you build the files, you submit it into ESS. We do a due date close, and then you don't hear from us for a couple weeks, sometimes months, and we'll mail you a bunch of DQ reports. At that time, you got to go back to what you'd done several months earlier, dig it all out, and respond to the DQ reports. Sometimes resubmit data, sometimes just provide data notes, and then we close it up, and then we're able to release the data. So the piece that, as Kelly mentioned earlier, we're trying to get to is where we just close once instead of having the double close, and instead of having those weeks of silence where you have to do some work, you put it aside, and 6 months later we come asking you about the work you did. So we can both sides get it all done, packaged up and out the door. So the next slide is the new process. So the new process is prior to the due date. We're going to be there. PSC will have office hours. You can continue to send PSC escalations. There'll be training videos. There'll be webinars. We've revised the business rule single inventory to make it more usable. You're going to be building your files. You'll submit your files into EdPass. You'll get your data quality reports shortly after you upload, and you'll be able to respond to those data quality reports, and then you submit. We have the data as of due date. We can release the data, and you don't hear from us again. Next slide. Key part about these business rules is they're built into the system. And the business rule single inventory that we posted covers the business rules that have to be resolved for the directory grades offered in the CCD, the Common Core data files, and the IDA child count files. The results of those will display on in EDPass, and they can be downloaded. So, for example, if you submit your membership file, you go to a different screen, and it'll list all the errors or the failures of the business rules. And you can punch a button, get it downloaded, and put it into an Excel file where you can see sort however you need to. And when the results come downloaded, they will come downloaded with the state IDs for the LEAs and schools, and it will give you the data that's in question, as well as what business rule is being triggered as failing. And as I mentioned, we've updated the business rule single inventory so that the language is more standardized across them. And so that it's easy. We did include the old business rule IDs so you can trace back if you need to. So I'm going to stop there. And I believe, Alex, you have a poll.
Yes, that's correct. We're going to be opening a poll to everyone right now. You should all see a question. We'll give folks a minute or so to respond.
So while people are responding to the control, there is a question in the question and answers, the Q&A. Thanks, I couldn't think of what that was.
That's okay.
In the Q&A, and that's about whether the IDA supplemental survey has been split into two separate surveys. It's actually being split into more than two separate surveys. So the IDA supplemental survey, going forward, when you submit your child count and environment files, the ones that you're going to submit this year in June of 28, you will submit the answers to the questions in the child count and environment section. And then come February, when you're submitting the discipline, the exiting, and the personnel files, you will submit each of those separately. So you can finish up your file spec 09 and respond to the questions in the IDA about file spec 09 and submit both of them, and then go on to do discipline and personnel or in any order you want. But the questions will be directly associated with the file specs that they relate to. So it's going to be in 4 sections then. Child count and environment, 1 section, personnel, another section, exiting, another section, and discipline, the last section.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay, there was a question also about what did I mean by when I said resolved. And what I meant by resolved is when you submit your data into EDFacts, it will run the business rules, and on the report, it will identify rules that failed. And you can resolve those rules in one of 2 ways: by submitting data that doesn't cause the business rule to fail, or by adding a data note. And for every business rule failure that's there has to be a data note, or the business rule failure has to go away because of new data. And when you type in a data note for this first year, you will be typing it in. We're not preloading previous answers you've given us, but a data note can apply to more than one failure. And you can click it, type it once, and associate it with multiple times that business rule failed. What we're hoping to do next year is retain those responses so that you can again choose that response. But every single year, you're going to have to pick the response that applies to a business rule failure. There are other questions there, Jess?
I'm gonna add a little bit to that last question that you just answered. Can you hear me, Jess? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you,
I
Kelly.
just wanted to add the clarification about, does it mean that the answer has been accepted? We're doing a lot of work this year in training what is an acceptable data note. So there are no surprises later after you've submitted the data of whether or not an explanation is appropriate. So Jess, I don't know if you can put a link to the training that includes those, the data note good examples and data note really poor examples. I will say that I think you're going to hear in a little bit those first data files, the directory and the grades offered, and those early CCD files. You folks have already been through the pilot year for those. You have been submitting fantastic data notes. So I just wanted to emphasize that the CCD is in really good shape. I know others are in pretty good shape, but you'll want to go and take a look at some examples of what are good data notes to ensure that you don't have to worry, is this an acceptable and accepted data note? But Barb's point is you have to have a note in before you submit the data. So if you are having problems with a particular grant reporting office that is rejecting the note that you have submitted or wanting more details, it would be really helpful to us if you would let us know who that is so that we can work with them to ensure we've got their information represented in the training. So nobody is surprised at any point. You should be able to submit your data at the due date with your data notes and be done with your submissions. So if we aren't hitting that, then is it because the data note does not match up with the guidance that we provided, or is it that we've changed the standard after you submit? So just wanted to add that part.
Okay, any other questions, Jess, that we need to resolve before we move on?
No, I think let's move on and then we'll circle back at the end. Okay, so we are going to go over what everyone should be doing right now to prepare for the EdPass Go Live. So there's two groups of individuals. There's state EdPass managers. Those are going to be the EDFacts coordinators, IDEA Part B data managers for outlying areas, and then a second individual identified by the EDFacts coordinator. The second group is going to be general EdPass users. So we're going to go over just kind of both and sets and what you should be doing to prepare. So state EdPass managers. Currently, you should be identifying users who need access to work on the directory, grades offered, and charted data files. That is the first group of users that will need access to EdPass and who you should be focusing on right now. Do they have their login.gov accounts set up? Those are the two main things. Once EdPass goes live, that's when we'll work, we'll be in PSC, we'll work with you all directly, we'll have the training, those dates will be released shortly in the next week or so to train the next steps, what comes next, because the next thing to do is really in EdPass itself. So those are the two main things. Once you have the directory grades offered in charter data files individuals identified, that's who you're going to focus on when EdPass goes live. Once all that is set and it's good to go, then you can focus on the next release of EdPass, as Barbara mentioned earlier, is going to be child count. So that will be the IDEA Part B data managers and the data stewards that work on that IDEA data. The second thing that everyone should be really focusing on is defining roles. CCD roles, charter roles. who are the individuals that need to have access to the data in EDPass, whether it be uploading, resolving data quality errors, adding data notes, updating the state submission plan, and ultimately submitting. Those are the main functionalities and the two data sets you should be focusing on right now. All the rest of the EDFacts data collection and identifying roles and who will have access, that can all be pushed back a little bit until these two main data areas are focused on. And then identifying the second EDPass manager, I do want to point out that almost all states have responded to PSC. We appreciate you guys being so proactive. However, if you haven't yet responded, or maybe you're still thinking about who that second person should be, do expect some outreach from myself or someone on PSC in the next week or two, just to touch base. Maybe you have some questions and everything's not answered or things like that. So just to open the conversation and just to help you identify who that second EDPass manager could be. Other things that you guys should be working on, I kind of touched on every single one of these. Login.gov accounts, they have to be set up on your own. So that link was provided to the state EDFacts coordinator back in November, and again a few weeks ago, just to the login.gov account setup. You should be using your state assigned email as your login.gov username. Your email is your username in login.gov. So that's why it's important to use your state assigned email address. Roles, we worked on that. EDFacts coordinators and EDPass managers are really working on identifying those roles. The roles are the permissions that each user is going to have access to in EDPass. As Kelly mentioned, data notes. Just remember to provide detailed and informative data notes. We have trainings on data notes. There's a technical assistance document on the COP site. We will get that in the Q&A shortly so that you have access to that. But just substantive data notes. As mentioned before, data notes provided for the CCD collections and even other collections, the IDEA data ones that just took place, they have been so much more informative than in prior years. So you guys are getting the hang of it, and you're understanding that the more the better. So I think when EDPass goes live, you guys will have that already set in stone to really apply that detailed information to resolve those data quality errors to ultimately submit your data. And then states needs. So be sure that the subject matter experts are reviewing the file specifications. There is information in there that they, if they're not reviewing the file specs, just ask them to review them annually in case guidance has changed or the program office has provided something that's a bit more clear. But that way they're getting ahead and proactively starting that process of reviewing the data and knowing what's being uploaded, so that when those data quality errors fire, you're already ahead of it, knowing that those might fire and how to resolve them, whether it be a data note or a resubmission. And also drafting and reviewing data notes for business rule failures. So just same thing, just start working on them ahead of time and getting the knowledge transfer and the data across, so the folks know that maybe there is a data anomaly, but to expect it so that it can be proactively responded to either in the state submission plan or actually resolving those data notes, those data errors. And then if you're just an EDPass state user, you're not the EDPass manager, you can set up your login.gov account as well. Once your login.gov account is set up, let your EDPass manager know that's going to be the EDFacts coordinator. And then there's a second individual that they're identifying so that they can split those responsibilities. But let them know that your login.gov account was created, because once they get to the next set of files that you manage, they can go ahead and create your account, and being proactive on that and not forcing them to really conduct that outreach will really make that a streamlined process for them, because this is all new for multiple folks in the state as far as this process goes. Once EDPass is live, then the EDPass managers can go ahead and create accounts. So I think one of the bigger questions PSC is getting is, I've created my login.gov account, what do I do now? and you really can't do anything right now. You have to wait for EdPass to go live and then for the state EdPass managers to create those accounts. So the guidance we're giving them is to stagger it. Wait a little bit. Everyone in the state does not need to have access to EdPass day one. It's really data area and due date focused. So just give them some time really learning the system and creating new processes most likely and things of that nature. Again, if you're in the state and you're uploading data for directory and charter and grades offered, remember to review the file specs. Directory has updates. So if you haven't looked over that file specification, there are updates in it, and I believe one of them is format related. So, just double check that before you start creating those data sets and those data files to upload into EdPass. Make sure you utilize the format checker. PSC updated the file format checker to accept those 7 files that will be live in EdPass for the first release. It is on the COP site, so we will also add a note to add the direct link there for you. I'll make sure to add it in the slides as well, so that once they're posted in the next couple of days, you can just click that link. But on the EdFacts Community Practice website, that file format checker has been updated. So you could start running your files through there between now and EdPass Go Live and just make sure they're formatted accurately, because that's step 1. Your files must be formatted accurately before they can go through validation. And then review the BRSI. The Business Rules Single Inventory has all of the business rules for the 22-23 data collection. So if you want to know those files that are going to go live in October, you can filter on that collection and it will pull all of them up. And PSC is going to be working on recording an updated training. There is an existing training on the COP site, but the columns are outdated. So we are going to be working on that, and we will have it posted in the near future so that you can get ahead of that as well. And then EdPass system testing. So we are planning the dates now and hope to have communication out to you all in the next week or so to the individuals participating. But the team consists of ed staff, 7 state EdFacts coordinators, and 2 IDA Part B data managers that will be participating in EdPass user acceptance training, also called UAT. And basically, they're testing system functionalities prior to go live and making sure things are working. We will give them files to upload so that they can see the errors, how to resolve them, how to add a data note, things like that. And then they'll be providing PSC and the department, as well as our test team, feedback. So we are really excited about being able to provide that opportunity. We did hear that you guys wanted to participate, and so we're really looking forward to being able to offer these sessions to get state feedback prior to it going live in March. So once EdPass goes live, what should you guys expect? So first and foremost, the 22-23 directory will be what you guys are going to be the first files that you upload, the school and district files. We are going to load the 21-22 directory data into EdPass. The reason for this is because it will allow those year-to-year checks or those match edits to run against your data to make sure that your 22-23 data is accurate. However, if when you're going through this process, you identify an issue with the 21-22 directory, you cannot load it into EdPass. Please reach out to PSC so that we can coordinate the change in EdPass, because it's not just a simple upload for 21-22. That is the only 21-22 file that will be in EdPass. So just make sure that if you have any questions with loading prior year data, reach out to PSC first. School and program office support is going to be available just like we had with the CCD pilot. So we're going to follow that same layout, that same process where we have office hours. The first day that EdPass goes live, we will be training the state EdPass managers on account setup, role setup, and creating and assigning roles. So that will be our main focus. It's going to be a 2-hour session. The training itself will not take very long. So we're looking to just kind of have a 2-hour block of training for EdPass managers, trying to set up accounts and trying to set up roles, because you must set up roles before you set up accounts. Because in order to have an account, you have to have a role to assign it to. So that process we will go over and make sure that you're trained. It'll also be recorded in case you're unable to make that date and time. For the first week that EdPass goes live, we will have technical office hours every day at a different time. That is like, I can't resolve this error. I don't understand why I'm getting this error. Just the same things that you guys call into the CCD office hours now for. It'll be very technical related, and then Wednesdays there will be an additional office hours that will be with the charter program office. That'll be for charter data quality errors, trying to figure out how to resolve those. And then on Thursdays we will do the CCD open office hours with NCES and then our data management team. And those will be to resolve CCD related ones. Before I get into the next set of slides, I'd like to kind of go through and start answering some questions. There are a couple questions in here. So let's see. Let me scroll up here. There's quite a few. I apologize. All right. Will loading the 2021-22 directory be an option? It sounds like coordinators do not have an option. That is correct. We are just automatically going to load that data. That's going to allow the year-to-year checks to process. If we don't load that data, then the 22-23 data won't have any prior year data to validate against. So that's why we're proactively loading that. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Proactively putting something in the state submission plan about a known error won't prevent it from firing, correct? That is correct. Great point. I apologize. That may have been a little confusing what I mentioned earlier. So what consider the state submission plan a general issue. Maybe there's a data anomaly that kind of goes along the school and or state and or LEA level file. So same way you use the state submission plan today is how it should be used in EdPass. You can identify a data anomaly. You can identify if data won't be timely, things of that nature. However, that is correct. The state submission plan is not connected to data quality errors. So data quality errors are where you will start actually applying data notes to the data. Now, another question. The login.gov site instructions say to use your personal email, not work. Is there a way to change that? We do not manage the login.gov site. That is a separate entity. We are using it to connect to EdPass. So the language on there is not something that we can edit. However, in our communication, our being the partner support communication, the broadcast, we've asked to specifically ask the state EdPass managers to communicate to use state email addresses. So we apologize that that's conflicting information, but we, for EDFacts use, are looking to that. Go ahead, Barb.
Yeah, so what happens with login.gov, it is a government-wide federal site to access various applications of the federal government. So if you use your work email address to set up a login.gov account, just make sure you do not connect that to any of your personal business with the federal government. So that the reason they have it set for the personal email is the assumption under login.gov is you are engaging using login.gov as an individual engaging with the federal government. So as just said, you can use your work email to set up a login.gov account. You will need to provide a phone number or other means of verification so that there's a multiple factor verification when you log into EdPass. But if you do use your work email, which we encourage you to do, just know that you should not use that login.gov account for any of your personal dealings with the federal government.
Thank you for clarifying that, Barbara. Okay, there's one other question here. I believe ESB will want to answer this. I heard data notes are not being approved before final data is submitted. Is that correct? Please explain this process.
Yeah, thanks, June. Yeah, it's there's not an approval process. Like the program offices, the data steward is not going to be reviewing and accepting those notes. The only thing that you need to do is submit the note, submit your data file, and you're done. So I'm not sure what more people are asking, and we keep getting this question. So I know there's something that I'm not connecting about this approval process. So I'm not sure how else to make it more clean. If a business rule triggers, it has to either be explained in a data note or the data have to be resubmitted and have that rule cleared. And then once the due date hits, the data notes will move to the data steward, who will then be reviewing those and so that they understand what they have received in their data files. So I don't know if that helps you. If that's more clear, you can ask me questions if I'm not.
I think that's clear. I believe the confusion is just to explain to attendees. Currently in the DMS, the process in the past has been that you all enter data notes and you communicate with the program office while you're going through that CCD review. The data management team is very thorough, very proactive, and very quick. So that process that exists in the DMS is going to look different in EDPAS. The program office won't, like Kelly mentioned, will not receive data notes until submit is hit. The data notes will be delivered to the department and program offices with the data that you submit in EDPAS. So that's why we've mentioned to provide substantive data notes and to really work with including information that will explain the data. That's also why we offer program office hours. If you want clarification on the data note, or maybe you want the program office to sign off, we're really encouraging you to utilize those program office hours to speak. You can speak directly to Jinsu at NCES. I think a lot of you know her directly from joining in the past. And she's super helpful, and that's our expectations going forward with all the other program office hours. So just keep that in mind. If you would like the program office to kind of sign off on your data note before you submit, we really, really suggest you utilize those office hours on those specific days. Okay, and there's a question, or there's clarification that came through to that extent. So one more question, I believe this would be for Kelly or Barbara. Will the program office reach out to the state if they have questions about our data notes?
It's possible. I would say the important thing we're trying to do is to ensure that you don't have to wonder what the target is that you need to hit to explain your data notes. It is possible the program office will say, hey, you told us that three large districts in your state did not submit data, but you didn't name those districts. Can you tell us who those districts are? I mean, that just as a wild example, but just a basic example, I guess. But it is possible. We are trying to eliminate the need for that follow-up afterwards.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on. Some of the questions relate to prior slides, so we will circle back at the end. So what does EDPAS Go Live look like? So EDPAS Go Live is actually going to be a staggered go live. So functionalities of the system will be available at different on different dates throughout the duration of EDPAS 101 being live. So we're going to open on March 13th. So what is March 13th going to look like? So EDPAS EDFacts managers are going to be able to create those roles, user accounts, and assign roles. Once those accounts are created and established, it's up to the state EdPass manager to communicate that to those users to make sure that they know that they can now log in. Uploading files. The functionality of being able to upload files and resolve those upload errors will be enabled. So while you are waiting on your account being created, as I mentioned before, if you're a state general user of EdPass, utilize the FFC to check for format errors. EdPass is going to work the same way that ESS did, where it's got to pass those format those format validations. The file has to be formatted correctly in order to process in EdPass. So utilizing that FFC to make sure your files are clean is step one. It will also be able to go through upload errors that are validation errors, also called upload errors or file errors. So the language is slightly changing. So once the user guide is posted, make sure to kind of glance over it and look through it. But that process of uploading will be enabled. From there, you'll be able to view data quality errors. So the file will be uploaded, and once it uploads successfully, it will go through data quality processing. From there, you will be able to see data errors, but you won't be able to respond to them with data notes. And what that means is that you will be able to see the data quality errors on screen. You will know what errors your file has failed. You can then download those data quality errors, and it will download into an Excel spreadsheet. And while you're while you're waiting for data notes to be enabled, you should be reviewing the data content internally, setting up meetings with your team to respond to the data quality errors, or maybe you will email the data quality errors to your team and ask them to respond. But utilize this time to really try to think through what the logical process in your state would be. And we say that with all the support we can give, thinking through, EdPass allows states to take processes and really adhere to them as to however your data governance works. So in ESS and OMB Max or CDQR, you guys really had to respond one way. You really only had one way to do things. EdPass really kind of gives you the freedom to create processes from your perspective and however it works. So one state's process may be totally different from another state's because their staff is set up differently, or their data governance is different. Or maybe you don't have a process that you currently have set in stone that's documented. Using this time in between the enabling of different functionalities is really to review the data in this first release of EdPass and really get to know it and create processes, but also communicate in your state. Talk to people, set up meetings if you need to, set 30 minutes aside to really review the data notes together. Whatever that may be, just collaborate so that everyone is on the same page and you know what your staff is putting, you all collectively know what's being put into EdPass, both the data, what data errors are firing, and how you're going to respond with data notes. And using when you are creating data notes, making sure they're meeting Ed standards. Like I mentioned, we have the TA doc on COP site, the community of practice site, and it really, all the program offices have reviewed it and provided input. So it's come directly from the department. The other functionality that will be enabled is updating the state submission plan. So you'll be able to go through and for those 7 files, directory, grades offered, and the 5 charter files, you'll be able to access the SSP for those and make updates. So once March 13th hits, the next functionality release will be March 27th, and that is when data notes are going to be enabled. So there's 2 weeks from go live to when you'll be able to enter a data note. So everything I just went over is really what you should be focusing on during those 2 weeks. When you're able to able to resolve data quality errors. So that's when entering those data notes is really important. And there'll be a count of data errors, so you'll be able to see how many errors your file has failed. And then as you add data notes, whether it is individual data notes for every single error, or you can apply one data note to multiple errors. As you apply them, the count of the number of errors resolved will go up, while your number of existing errors goes down. That's one of my favorite parts of EDPass. If you like to keep track of things, then that is a really cool feature. I think people will be able to, if someone logs in, they'll be able to see how many data errors have been responding to, since the last time you joined in. So, remember to attend technical office hours, as we mentioned, for technical support. So once data notes are enabled, if you're having trouble or difficulty, please make sure you're joining those office hours. That's what they're there for. Okay, April 5th is when submit is going to be enabled. So this is really exciting. This is when you will be able to submit the data to the department in EDPass. By this time, by that date, everything should be resolved. And maybe I shouldn't say everything should be resolved, but you should have communicated internally and really been working on data notes and entering them into the system. As it was mentioned earlier, you cannot submit data in EDPass until all data errors have been resolved. So your status will go from an errors status to a ready to submit status, and that is when you can submit data. So that's the end goal, is having all levels that are required to be submitted in that status of ready to submit in order to ultimately submit the data. So as I mentioned before, this is a brand new system. It's a brand new process. There are brand new processes being created in every single state, with state EDFacts coordinators and or EDPass managers being the account creators and role creators. So as you talk through the process and as you're seeing things that are working and everything agrees, please make sure you're documenting anything. For any reason, if anyone in the state was to leave or move to a different position and someone new comes in, having a process documented is the biggest concern. So as you guys get through the first release of EDPass, please make sure that you're communicating on what's working, what's not working. Similar to us doing the lessons learned in July, we encourage you in the state to also do that and really just openly talk about what works and what doesn't work. Because if for any reason someone was to leave and then a new EDPass manager comes in with no experience, PSC will be there to bring them up to speed, but it's always really good to have solid documentation for them to lean back on. Okay, I'm going to pause there for a moment before we move on to our next section and address some of the comments that I see here. Okay. How will it work with EDPass since we do not submit charter files? Our charter schools do not meet the definition. Will the data notes suffice?
Want me to take that one, Jess?
Absolutely.
Okay. So when you first come into the system, there's going to be a page called the Data Submission System, and that is a customized state submission plan. So previously, the state submission plan was not customized. So if you're the state that does not have charter schools, when we first open up EDPass, go to that page and look at the row that says charter, and what it should say next to it is not required. So when you get into EDPass, one of the first things you should do is download this entire list and check it over to make sure that the items that are marked as no data in EDPass are items that you're supposed to be submitting. Back to you, Jess.
Awesome. And thank you for elaborating on that. Just want to add that when EdPass does go live and we do that when we do the training with the EDFacts coordinators and the state EdPass managers, one of the things that we'll highlight is how to do that process, really to download, because that data submission list is really what your state is required. It is based on the program offices, so it's been vetted, and if something looks off or different, we definitely want to know. So that'll be one of the first things that we do. Okay, the next question. When we submit Directory LA, our state downloads an extract from Emaps and loads the data into our table before we can create our school directory. We do the same for school before we can create our grades offered. Are those extracts going to be available the day after we submit, similar to the files in ESS and Emaps?
Okay, so yes, they will be. So one of the things in EdPass is after you've uploaded the data, you can go to that data submission list, and there'll be a little kebab menu to the side where you can download the data back to yourself to see what ended up in EdPass. So in this particular case, after you load up your directory for the LEA level, you can go to there and you can download that file, and it will be in the order of the file spec. So then you can do the same thing for the school. After you've loaded up your school directory, you can go to that kebab menu, download the school directory again, and then create your grades offered. Back to you, Jess.
Okay, thank you. A little ways back, we had a question about CSPR correction period. I'd like to go back to that. I don't want them to think we forgot about them. The question was, will we no longer have CSPR correction periods? While we were speaking to slides, OESC provided that since CSPR does not have checks before submission, there will be a correction period. However, that correction period should be manual. More information on CSPR will be coming out for OESC, but that's what we have for that. And there's one more. Let me get all the way to the bottom. In regards to submit prior to the due date, would it be appropriate to view all prior actions as staging until final? And we can upload some files prior to the submit date instead of all the files at once. Do you want to take that one, Barbara?
Yeah, I believe that's true. Let me hold on that one and get back to the group on the answer to that question.
Okay.
We're kind of running a little low, so is there any other major questions?
No more.
Just okay.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to David Lee. He's going to go over some standard features in EdPass.
Okay, let me just unmute myself so you guys can hear me. Thanks, Jess. What I'm going to do is I know that for a lot of you folks who have participated in our prior webinars, we've shared a lot of standard features via screenshots and whatnot. But what I wanted to do today is just kind of share a handful of slides that show the functionality that will probably be most important as of go live in March. So let me just share the standard features here. Once you log into EdPass, you'll have a top menu bar navigation blue bar, or if you will, at the top. The first thing you'll notice is on the left, it'll just show you a quick last login date and timestamp. And on the right side, what you want to focus on is a data submission list and the upload functionality. So those are the two things that you will be probably most involved in once we go live here in March. A couple things I want to make a note of for the data submission list is that first it'll list all the required files and EU levels that are required, which have been approved by the program offices. So in other words, if you're not required to submit a file, that will be clearly designated within this list of data files. So as Barbara had mentioned, once you have access to this, you may want to go in and just confirm that the files that you indeed do not, the files that you are indeed not required to submit are noted as not required to submit. And if there are any issues, you can reach out to PSC about that. Another part of the data submission list is that you'll have access to the SSP and data quality errors and data notes, which I'll show you how to access that on the next slide or two. And then the upload functionality, this is basically the main page or the main tab you will use to upload your data files. And this is going to be very important, obviously, because that's where you will be uploading and submitting your files. And the access to this button or this page is only given to the roles that have permission to do so. So that's another key function here, is that if you do not have access, permission to upload a file or files, you will not have access to that page. Next slide, please. So once you get into the data submission list, this is a quick snapshot, but you will see all of your data files, all of the data files listed on this list, and they will be sorted by due date, school year, and functional spec, file spec number. So you can see the numbers there, 1, 2, and 3 designated on the left. That's the default sort order, but if you want to find a specific file, you can always use the search capability at the top right to just type in a file spec name or a number, and you can find the file that you are looking for that way as well. Next slide, please. The next part of this page that's important is the download functionality. So this is important because if you remember in ESS, the users are able to access the data that have been uploaded or submitted directly in ESS. However, in EDFacts, that functionality currently does not exist. So what you will want to do is, if you want to confirm or verify the data that you have uploaded, you'll want to use the download functionality in order to download the data that you have uploaded to confirm or review in CSV or Excel format. So that's where you're going to upload your data and then just confirm it if you need to using the download prompt. Okay, next slide. Another couple of things we want to note here is that there are filter options on the page. You can filter the page by one or more columns. As such, you can see in the red box there. And then they're also sorting in ascending or descending order on certain columns, the way you want to possibly sort. So those are just some, I guess, sorting or filtering functionality that you can do on the page to make it easier for you to navigate and find certain files. Okay, I think that's all I had. Yes, so I know it's just a brief update, but I just wanted to show you, we wanted to just show you the key important items that you'll be responsible for once the application goes live here in March. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Beth Sinclair and Liz Fenning. I think this is the motivational speech part of the presentation.
Afternoon, everyone. And the next, can we go to the next slide? So I'm here in Chansu Chen's stead. She's the ESB lead for the CCD collection. And the CCD proved to be a very apt opportunity to test this process because we already had the data management system or the DMS in place. So we did that. For the 21-22 CCD collection, we pilot tested this approach. And I'm here to report back on that because the headline is that it really does show us that this is doable. So the thumbs up part of the pilot, most states, so the first part of the pilot was the 21-22 in the order of the file specs there, directory, grades offered, then lunch, CCD school, membership, and FTE staff. And so the thumbs up part of this is Most states addressed all or most errors prior to the due date. Data notes in SSP and DMS were more substantive than in the past. I know folks were very concerned earlier in this webinar about having data notes rejected. That it doesn't, it's in my experience, it's never that clear cut, but certainly a data note that just says the data are correct as reported is not as helpful as explaining that the data are correct as reported for this reason, or something like that. And we had many states who used the office hours to resolve errors, literally popping in some cases for just a few minutes to ask a very specific question and then going on with their day. The thumbs down here is that states do continue to miss some of the submission deadlines. And that will become more of an issue with EDPAS because the deadline you won't be able to continue to submit after the deadline the way you can now. Next slide. So there were 14 states that addressed all the errors, including the 5-year edits in the DMS and all of the issues that were flagged in the self-executed errors. These were the ad hoc errors, and they did this by the due date for those 2 groups of files there. I'm not going to read it. People can read. You can check to see if your name is on this list. But this is a third of the states, and this was our first pilot. So this was really great news. I think we don't need too long on this slide because states are going to be looking for their names and they're in alpha order. Now, I did want to, we also did kind of a mini version of the pilot for the 21-22 FileSpec 032 and 040, which is the dropouts and the completers files. And this also had a thumbs up and thumbs down findings. So we'll do the first group, the thumbs up. Many states submitted the data into ESS early, which allowed time for them to review the comments and resolve them prior to the due date. That sounds familiar to the model that we're looking for. Again, the quality of the comments in SSP and DMS improved, and more states were using the office hours to resolve errors. Thumbs down. Some states submitted their data into ESS but didn't address the errors that provide comments in DMS prior to the due date. Some states waited until the due date to submit their data into ESS, which meant that there was no time for them to resolve the errors prior to the due date in DMS. And 6 states did indeed miss the 2/8 submission deadline for one or both of the files. They had, although 2 of them had comments in SSP, but even those comments doesn't get your data in as part of the files that go forward. So we really need to meet those due dates. And again, I want to flag that first bullet in the thumbs up section. Getting your data into ESS early to allow enough time for the QA was a really big issue, was a critical part of success for the states that were successful. And the parallel for EDPAS is that states will need to upload their data into the sandbox, into this upload space, to get their errors and to review those and resolve them in advance of the due date, so you can get everything resolved and tied up with a bow in time to hit submit on the due date. So that's that. I really can't stress that enough. The due date is the date by which you need to have resolved everything so you can hit submit. It's not when you need to, when states should be uploading their files into the sandbox for the first time. And in fact, I strongly guess that if we get close to the due date in states, and there's a state that hasn't uploaded any files, their PSC will probably contact folks to just make sure that they don't need extra support. So let's go to the next slide. So 22 states for this pair of files addressed all errors in DMS prior to the due date. So they get the gold medal. But there were 13 states that addressed most of the errors. And those were really close to the finish line. They were the change that there's just a couple, and there were little things that needed to be wrapped up that would have pushed them into the gold medal bin. And so these are, even though they're, silver medal in this case really means you were super, super close. And so doing the math here, we're looking at 35 states were pretty self-sufficient and got things largely or completely resolved prior to the due date for these two files. So this, again, is more really good news and encouraging observations from the pilot test. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Jess, I think.
Sure. Thanks, Beth. And yeah, to piggyback off what Beth said, PSC is going to be proactively supporting states through the first go live of EdPass for every data collection. So you might get outreach from us earlier than normal because, like Beth mentioned, you have to respond to all data quality errors before you can submit your data. We cannot wait till the due date to to upload your files and expect that you're going to have the time to respond to everything. So with that expectation, what's the end goal? The end goal is that data is usable at the due date. The next day after a due date, the data technically should be ready to be used by the program offices, other areas that use the data. That's the end goal. Complete and accurate submissions means that you're finished with the data and you won't see it again. As Barbara presented earlier in the old data quality diagram, currently you guys submit data in December and then you see it again in March and you're expected to kind of stop what you're doing and go backwards and review that data. That is not the process going forward. You will upload the data, review all the data quality errors, and you won't see it again unless there's a major issue with the data identified by the program office, or if you don't upload the data and submit it. So, the goal is to just get it off your desk and move forward. And then, like I mentioned, there's no data quality reviews for the CDQR or IDEA. After due date, you will not be getting those. So as difficult of a change in process that we know it is, we do know that you can do it. It's been proven that it's possible. It does take a little bit of upfront work to change your process, and we understand that, the department and the PSC. So that's why we proactively will do things throughout these EdPass closes, I should say open data submission periods, to support you guys. So please don't be annoyed if you hear from us a couple weeks earlier than normal, because really we're just trying to get ahead of it so that we can help you guys resolve data quality errors. And then, we're here to support you. This is our contact information. If you've never contacted PSC, we're open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern time. And that's our email address and our phone number. You can call us or email. And then we're also going to give you guys office hours along with the program offices, both technical and policy related. As a reminder, for those policy office hours or when you're responding to data quality edits, the error message is going to display in EdPass. And it will show you the specific data that's failing that edit. So it's not going to be that you're going to have to blindly find things, or like in prior CDQRs where you only got 10 of the 50 failed LEAs, you will see all of the data right there in front of you. Like I mentioned before, the business rule single inventory, it has detailed rule logic. It has been standardized. So there are changes in the BRSI, which is why we will do a recorded training and post that before the go live. And we'll also have short how-to technical videos, because we know people don't always have time to join technical office hours or to call PSC. Sometimes people work really late when we're not open and you might need help. So the goal of those short how-to videos from a technical perspective is really to support you on your time. We're going to be available when you need us, but sometimes we know your time is limited. So we're trying to give you guys other options with trying to figure things out when PSE is unavailable or if you're busy during the day and you can't call us. And then, of course, user guides. We're creating the EdPass user guide. And then there's also a state EdPass manager user guide for the admin functionalities. So those are separated, but there will be user guides. And for now, I'm going to turn it over to Liz. She's going to present on the next couple of slides about data.
All right, so why does accurate data matter? Here's a list of places that EDFacts data are used. This is just a high-level list. There are other places that the data are used, but this is the nation's report cards, annual reports to Congress, CCD uses the data, IDEA, SPP, APR, IDA data, as well as assessment data are uploaded into the SPP APR. IDA publishes their data on their website. CSPR uses the EDFacts data. Data Express, the data are posted, some of the data are posted at Data Express, which researchers and the public can access. News sources, as well as government measures. Next slide. The data you submit shows up in the news. So this is just two examples that we posted, and you can take a look when we send out the slides of how the data are posted in the news. And this is really important to communicate with your team. If you have not, everybody should be aware of the data that is being submitted. There should be no surprises. One example that sticks out heavily in my mind is the assessment data. The assessment data is co-stewarded by both OESE as well as OSEP. So the assessment data is also used in the SPP APR. So what that means is the state should be talking to their IDA data managers as well as their state directors who certify the SPP APR in regards to what assessment data that they're submitting. Again, no surprises. Go ahead and talk to touch base with the charter data managers, the IDA Part B data managers, state assessment directors. Again, no surprises. Next slide. And this is just a reminder of our available resources. The writing a good EDFacts data note, we talked about that earlier in the presentation. When you get to the slides, you can click on that link. And then there's back to basics on IDA data notes. And then also, if you haven't had time to, or if you haven't had time or you haven't participated in any of our previous webinars, those are listed here as well. And what to expect from us in the next 6 months. We will continue to have webinars every 3 months. So expect another webinar in June, or in May, sorry, in May. Expect another webinar in May. Pre-recording trainings, which Jess has talked about, which she talked about in the previous slide. Open office hours. Make sure that you are, if you have questions or if you just want to listen into what other states are asking, what other questions states are asking, feel free to just sit in on the office hours, even if you don't have questions. CCD, that still says April 12th, but that's going to be changed. When you get these slides, that'll be changed to April 26th. And then in May, we'll start, again, CCD and IDA office hours for the June 28th due date. We'll continue with our focus groups, as well as there are a few states that are helping us with our user acceptance testing. So they'll be helping us test the new system as the functionalities become available. And next slide. And we want to hear from you. After the June 28th deadline, or if you don't want to wait, just go ahead and send any concerns, praises, anything that you have to PSC. After the June 28th deadline, we will be meeting so that we can prepare for the fall 2023 collection. We want to know what worked and what didn't work. What we could have done better. Were technical and program specific office hours beneficial, and any other topics that you'd like Ed to know as we prepare for the fall collections. And now we'll open it. I think we'll any questions that we didn't get to, I think we'll start answering those if we have until we run out of time.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. Okay, I am going back to the top. There was a question, when is MOE CEIS due for 2023? The FFY 2022 data, I believe, will be due February 24th. I'm sorry, February 22nd, 2024. So that is when that data will be due. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll back down to the bottom here. If you have any questions that you've had throughout the webinar and you haven't posted them yet, please post them in the chat, the Q&A. Any info on 035? The 030, if you're referring to the file spec, it was posted late last week, so it is available on the EDFacts Initiatives website. You can download that file specification now. So we apologize for that taking so long to get up, but it is online now and you can access it. And again, it's on the EDFacts Initiatives website. Okay, I'm going to put the link here. I'm sorry, I'm just getting it for you. That way you can quickly link it. That is where the file spec is. Okay, there aren't any other questions at this time. So we're going to give it a minute. We're going to let you guys think through that. I know that's a lot of information to digest, so I'm going to sit here for just a moment. Okay. How do NCES numbers for new schools work? When, where does that happen within the directory process? I'm going to let David or Barbara respond to that one.
So the NCS ID are issued when you upload a school file and you've marked the school as new or added. Same thing with an LEA. If you mark them as new or added, after you upload it and after that directory file processes, it passes all the format checks, then the NCS IDs will be issued. And the way to obtain those NCS IDs is to go to the page to download the directory or school data into Excel, and then it'll be populated in there.
Perfect. Thank you. Any idea when the assessment data changes are coming, or are they being split into new file numbers entirely? I will let ESP take that one.
Can you repeat that one again?
Yeah, it's about the assessment files. When the assessment file changes are coming, I'm assuming they're talking about when they're being posted, or
Yes.
Are they being split into new file spec numbers?
Okay, so our plan is not to do that. We did upload to ed.gov the assessment file specs without the Q&A material in them. And in there, for example, in file spec 175, you will submit both the lower grades and the higher grades. And just for a quick catch up of everybody, in the package this time, we did split all the assessment data groups into lower grades, usually below 8, from 3 to 8 for math and reading, and from 3 to 9 for science, and the high school grades. And the reason that we did that is the number of assessments administered that are allowable is different for the high school grades than for the lower grades. And so to keep it all straight, we had to split the two. So we're working on getting the Q&As organized so it makes sense to everybody. But what will happen is if your current system produces any of the assessment files that include the lower grades and the higher grades, there will be some changes to the coding of the table name. And if you're using assessments beyond the regular assessments, there'll be new permitted values for them, but they should be in the same file spec.
Thank you, Barbara.
Back to you.
Okay, there was a question asked earlier in the webinar regarding the DMS. The question is there any way to pull out previous answers from DMS as a reference prior to the demise of DMS? So the errors or historical data notes can't be downloaded from DMS. However, the DMS will continue to generate errors or run them for at least another year. So states can go over to the DMS, grab those historical data notes for the related data areas that you're getting in EDPAS, and paste them or reuse them in EDPAS. So there's no need to start from scratch. If you've added a data note in the past to DMS for a related data quality error that fires in EDPAS, you can just reuse that, recycle it going forward in the DMS. Okay. I'm going to scroll back down to the bottom. Bear with me here for 1 second. Once the system goes live, so once EDPAS goes live, are the ability to enter comments going to be 2 weeks later or by the next day? Hoping this will be right after submission rather than waiting to be able to add a data note. That's a great question. So when the system goes live on March 13th, you'll be able to upload data files. And this is specifically for the CCD and charter data collection, so EDPAS 101. With the development of EDPAS, we are looking to, we're kind of separating out the release of functionalities. So March 13th, you'll be able to upload files and see the data errors that your file received on screen. You just won't be able to respond to them. But 2 weeks later, we will enable that functionality, allowing you to enter data notes to resolve those errors. However, going forward, so looking forward to the June IDEA data collection, when you upload that file, once it uploads successfully, means it's formatted properly and it passes all of the upload validations, that file goes immediately through the data quality process in EDPAS. So it automatically runs the errors. Whatever fails, you'll see on the screen right away. You'll within a few minutes receive a status of errors if your file fails validation. Fails data quality edits. Right then is where you can start to add data notes. So it is all within the same day, whereas in the DMS you have to wait overnight right now, but it will all be a very fluid process. There won't have to be, you won't be waiting on anything. I hope that helps. Okay, this is related to 206 and 212. I've submitted the 206 and 212, but we had changes from our directory from 2122 to 2223. Will we be given the opportunity to resubmit the files after the CCD files for 2223 are submitted in March and April? So it sounds like the state is looking for a resubmission opportunity for 206 and 212. I'll let Ed answer that.
Hey, Jess, this is David. I think I'm going to have to confirm that and get back to the state who's asking that question about resubmission of those files.
Awesome. We will reach out to you Mr. Cohen, and get you an answer once ESB evaluates it. Okay, right now that is all. There is a question. It's about file downloads. The file downloads will be in the format of the file specification. So when you upload a file to EDPAS and it processes successfully into the database, meaning then it moves on to the data quality validations, the data can then be extracted from EDPAS and it'll be in the format of the data file that you uploaded. So you can utilize that however you need it in your state. I know right now a lot of you go to Emacs and download the directory extract. So this will be similar to that, but it'll be in EDPAS. And you'll download that file and export it from EDPAS, and then you can share it out or reuse it and create your school level directory as mentioned before. Okay. Here is another question related to 206 and 212. There are a number of us that had to remove records due to directory changes for 206 and 212. This impacts a number of states. So maybe what we'll do, David, is once we evaluate the question, we can communicate this out to the states and let them know next steps. Nevada also. Okay, wonderful. So we will put together communication once that impact's evaluated, and then we'll create a next step for you guys, depending on what the department decides. Okay, at this time, there's no other questions. I'm going to go on mute. Okay. Here's a great question. Where can I find a copy of this slide deck and today's recording? The recording of today's webinar and a slide deck will be posted to the modernization page of the EDFacts Communities of Practice. So you will be able to, most likely by the end of tomorrow, be able to access the slides. It just takes a little bit for us to download the recording. I'm going to put the link here so that you can access it, but it'll be on the modernization page. Liz mentioned earlier that that is also where all of our prior recordings and slide decks are housed. So you can kind of just scroll through and they're chronologically uploaded there. But I know David went over some standard features today in EDPAS. If that's the first time you've seen it, I encourage you to go back to, I think, December's webinar. And he went into depth over some of the pages in EDPAS and what it will look like on the screen. I really encourage you to go there if you're kind of wanting to see more of EDPAS. That's a really great place to start, would be the December webinar. You can go through the slides and see the screens. Okay, I'm going to go on mute for a minute. There's no more questions. I'm going to allow people to kind of post anything as they think of it. We'll give it a minute.